Hello everyone, my name is Austin. I am the gem cutter behind iFacet. Today I'll be cutting this sapphire into one of the most unique and difficult gemstone designs. That design is called the Cleopatra's Eye. Let's get started. First we'll need to attach the stone to the dot stick. Next we'll need some super glue. A dot does a lot. I use a transfer jig to make sure that the dot stick is centered to the stone. Next we'll insert the stone into the faceting machine. Set the angle. Lower the mast, put the faceting machine on the right index, start the water drip. It's time to cut in the first facet. So if you want to know a little story on why Cleopatra's Eye is known as one of the hardest faceting diagrams to cut, it is because of the precision it takes to achieve a nice round pupil on the end result of the stone. Bob Keller, who was the original creator of this unique gemstone design, made one of the hardest faceting diagrams known to date. Some reference points to note while I describe the cutting of this Cleopatra's Eye is the top of the stone is known as a crown, the bottom of the stone is known as a pavilion, and the side of a gemstone is known as a girdle. Here is a little drawing to show what it takes to achieve a nice round pupil on the crown of the stone in the end result. On the first step, you have to make sure you have all the first tier of facets meet at a perfect center point on the pavilion of the stone. The next step is cutting a girdle, which sets the stone size and shape. You have to make sure all the facets line up with the first tier of facets, as shown here. The final step of the pavilion facets are the ones that meet in between the center point facets and the girdle facets. These can be really tricky because you have to get the right angle, and a lot of times you have to change the angle around 0.1 degrees or so to achieve this, so everything meets perfectly. Once you finish cutting in all the facets, then you have to go over them with pre-polish and polish. So you cut all the facets in about 4 times. The steps that I go through are 80 grit, 600 grit, 3000 grit, which is pre-polish, and 100,000 grit for the final polish. The first step in cutting the crown would be to level the girdle of the stone and make sure all the facets align to the girdle facets. The next step is the tier 2 crown facets, which make the stone a little more flat and they give you a guideline for the pupil facets. I usually then make a clover formation before cutting the pupil facets to align the table better. I then cut the pupil facets, which include the star facets, and I do this with my pre-polished lap because they are so tiny. The last step is cutting the table to make the finished pupil of this Cleopatra's Eye gemstone. Currently I am pre-polishing the pavilion facets. Now I am pre-polishing the girdle facets. This is a polishing step where the stone really starts to sparkle. You can tell from this video I only polished the top of the girdle facets, and that's because the rest of the girdle will be cut away anyway when cutting the crown. Most facetors do this to save time. Now I'm transferring the stone to cut the crown. I use a 2-part epoxy for the transfer step. Now that we're on the crown, I use an 80 grit lap to speed up the cutting. This is a 600 lap and I use that to knock out some of the big scratches from the 80 grit and to line up everything closer. This is what the stone looks like before I go to pre-polishing. You can see the clover facets in the center that I drew earlier. Now it's time to move on to pre-polishing the crown, and I do this with 3000 grit on a zinc lap. Now I'm on the final step of cutting this entire stone, which is a polishing step. I do this on a 100,000 grit diamond on a 10 lap. This is where I get super excited to see what the final stone will look like. I would like to know, do you think that this is one of the most unique gemstone designs that you can have in an engagement ring? Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in any of the gemstones that I cut, you can visit my website at ifacet.shop or ifacet on Etsy. I will have a link in the description of this video as well.